You're listening to She's the Business podcast. Do you ever feel like you've lost connection with that old version of you? You know, that one that was so confident about exactly who you were and what you were doing and what you were going to do in life? Well, if you felt like that, and maybe especially if you have been through motherhood and you now have children and you're still waiting for that moment to feel like, oh, I found myself again. Well, today's episode has been created especially with you in mind. So stay tuned. We're going to be talking all about how you can reclaim your power and that self-determination and actually start to live your life feeling really connected with the purpose that you were put on this planet for. So stay tuned.
Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Osborne, and over the last 25 years in marketing and business, I've helped many brands to launch, scale, and grow, with some of them becoming multi-billion-dollar companies. I'm here to inspire you to get out of your own way and create a profitable, fulfilling business while living the lifestyle you really desire, without all the hustle. So I bring you She's the Business podcast, a unique blend of strategies, tactics, mindset, health, and spirituality, literally everything you need to be the successful leader of your dream business. Made by women for women, this is your weekly dose of motivation and inspiration.
So joining me today on the podcast to talk all about how you can reclaim your power and your self-determination, really connect with that new version of yourself as you're emerging through the different phases of life and motherhood, is one of my beautiful Business Jam clients who has been in my program and has seen some great shifts in her business. And this is Alena Turley. She is an expert in somatic practices. She's a somatic therapist for women in early midlife who are navigating through that phase of reclaiming their power and being able to have joy, energy, show up as the best mum and the best human. Now, Alena is also a podcast host of the Unboxable podcast, where she talks all about self-development for women. She's a digital storyteller, and she's the founder of the Soul Mama Hub that she created back in 2009, which is an online and real-life space offering pop-up events and community connection for women and mothers in early midlife. So Alena touches on so many different aspects of what is happening, why we're feeling this feeling of stuckness, of disempowerment, the reasons why, so that you can build some self-awareness and actually start to understand what might be happening for you right now when you're feeling that disconnection from purpose, from self, and help you to start to reclaim it, step back into it. So I loved this conversation. She has so much to share. And without further ado, let me just hit play and let you listen in to this amazing interview. All right. Hello. I'm here with the lovely Alena Turley. Welcome to the podcast, Alena. So excited to talk to you today.
Thank you, Jen. It's so lovely to be here.
Yes, exciting. Well, we're going to get chatting in just a moment all about how we reclaim our power and our self-determination as we emerge through motherhood, and what a fantastic topic to discuss today. I think we all, it's like this unknown road that we're on, isn't it? The more that you go on it, the more I feel like we just don't know the road that we're on. But before we do that, I'd really love to hear you tell us a little bit more about exactly what you do in your business. Who do you serve? What is it that is your expertise?
Sure. So I'm kind of got a wide variety of diverse experiences that I bring to my business. And I've come from a background of a lot of different things. And I've now started to really focus on women and mothers who are in early midlife. And I offer somatic practices and somatic programs and just a real fast track to reconnection, joy, clarity, these kind of things that we can just lose as we change, we evolve into this different aspect of ourselves through motherhood, through life, through starting businesses, through getting closer to our purpose as we evolve, all of those things bring up a lot of different stuff. And sometimes they bring up stuff that can stop us or keep us stuck. So I'm really into that. And I also sometimes work with women in their kind of personal branding. So that's another area that I've become kind of accidentally good at. So
I love
I get
that.
asked to do that. It's actually like, it's something I kind of do by request. I don't actually market it, but it's something that I'm being asked to do more and more. So it's an interesting thing that's evolving as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see the linkage there because, when you do step into your power and who you are, that is your personal brand. So it is really 100% linked. Now, but for people who might be new to the word somatic and what does that actually mean, do you want to describe a little bit about what it is that you do? What is somatic, and why somatic even?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like the simplest way to put it is it just means through the body. So it just means that sometimes we have things come up that don't necessarily make sense to the mind or the brain, and that rational and talking and these kinds of approaches, though extremely helpful and important, sometimes don't reach certain levels of our consciousness or our being. But sometimes when we work through the body, and it doesn't always sort of happen the way it sounds. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're moving or that you're doing anything physically in sessions with me. It just means that our approach is fundamentally through a felt sense rather than a thought sense of things. And that gives us another way in and also another way to clear stuff that gets stuck and stuff that keeps us stuck.
Mm-hmm. And by stuff, you're referring to energy, emotions,
Yeah,
past
both of
memories.
those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and any or all of the above. There's a lot of different ways that people experience that. So some people say, I feel stuck. I just don't know why. Like it can't, sometimes things happen to us before we can even speak. I was working with a woman last week who had some trauma from such an early part of her life that when it was coming up for her, it was 100% felt in the body and she couldn't speak. And I've experienced that as well. I've had really early life trauma come up and then it's like I'm mute. So there are some things that we can't talk about and our body will not allow us to talk about. And so somatic practice is really powerful for that. So yes, energy, emotions, whatever it is for you, it's very unique for each person, very individual for each person.
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it? Because when you say trauma as well, I guess just so anyone listening to clarify what we mean by that, can be, I guess, quite a wide range of things that might come under that trauma banner. So are we meaning things that we have turned in or we have experienced as a trauma, but may not be under the banner of like really massive trauma, like people that go off to war and see that type of thing? Like, what do
Sure,
you sort
all
of,
of the
when you're
above, yeah.
meaning it, what do you see it as?
So I actually choose to word. I actually like to use the word adversity sometimes because that feels more accessible. So, and the thing is that when you experience a trauma, it's not about the thing that happened. It's about the wound that occurred as a result of the thing that happened. So it's a wound. It's a hurt. It's something that happens to you that your body feels you need protecting from. And so it does. It does its thing. And the word somatic is a bit of a buzzword at the moment, which is, in some ways great and in some ways unfortunate. But somatic is not a new idea. This is something, somatic practices include Tai Chi, yoga, martial arts. I'm a martial artist. So, lots of different ways that we can actually access the body's record of who we are and what we've experienced. But trauma is something we feel often as a result of an event, or a complex array of events. So it's a spectrum. It's like autism spectrum, or, there's a huge spectrum. It's not one thing. There's little T trauma, big T trauma. There's lots of ways to talk about that spectrum, but there's no one thing that defines trauma. What defines trauma is your experience and your wound and how it affects you.
It's so interesting. And I just wanted to go off down a little mini tangent for a moment because this isn't an area that I'm not an expert at all. And so I love to ask questions because was interesting in reflection. I had let's say it wasn't an entirely positive experience when I left my corporate role. I was a senior. No, it's fine. Absolutely. And, it did take me a little while to be able to talk about it. But about, let's say, I'm trying to think how long it was. It was a while after I'd left and I'd started my business, but I got headhunted for a different role. And I thought, well, I might just go along to the interview anyway and see what it's all about. And I was there in this interview and I started shaking, like shivering. I was
That's
like I was
100% a trauma
freezing.
response.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going on. I was a little bit embarrassed at the time, and I was thinking, "Gosh, I hope this person um, isn't noticing that I'm shaking." And I was trying to hold myself together and continue the conversation. The weird thing was that I wasn't actually even sure I wanted a job. I was actually just more going along to see, like, oh, I'll see what is it that they might offer me, kind of thing. And I had that, and I was going home, and I just had this. I don't know what you call it. It was like a voice in my head just saying, no, 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 you do not want that. And I got home and I knew without a doubt, I was like, it doesn't even matter what they offer me, even if it's, well over 200 grand a year, which I knew that the role was going to be in that realm. I was like, I don't care how much they offer me. I'm not taking it. Like, I'm just not doing it. But it was interesting because I didn't know at that time enough about the physiological response of the body. And like, since I've learned a little bit, I'd say a micro bit, not as much as what I look back and I'm like, oh my goodness, I was having a physical reaction to being in this place, the danger that my body or my subconscious must have thought I was entering into.
Yeah, that was your body keeping you safe, but also releasing. That was a release. So that what you described, was it your whole body? Not just one part, like with a shiver, it's kind of a little part of your body, but was it your whole body shaking?
I was shaking that much that my voice was shaking. Like,
yeah, so that's what I thought. Some people experience this in birth, interestingly. So if you've ever watched a cat give birth or any mammal, this often happens. You'll see them shaking. What it is it's a way of releasing an intense reaction to pain or a wound or an intensity of experience. I've had it with one of my births. I've had 3 births, and my third, this occurred after the birth. It was very strange. I was holding the baby for the first time and my whole body was rocking. But I've also done some, it was amazing. And I didn't know what was going on, like you described. It's not something, it's almost like a reflex. So it's a mammalian reflex. And what it does is release. It actually kind of, if you think about a baby, you know how you shake a baby when they're upset? So it's something that soothes us. So it's a very, very interesting thing that you had that happen when you walked back into that environment. It makes a lot of sense. So it was like that's when you were able to feel this thing and release it.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? And in that moment, I
I'm
just,
not.
yeah. And you just think, like, it was strange because in that moment, it was almost like I was letting go the last string, the safety net that I'd always had of like, well, I've still got my job. I can always go back to the job. Even though I wanted the business and I'd taken steps down that path, I kind of felt like in that moment, it was like I cut the last string and I was like, I'm not attached to that anymore.
That's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful demonstration of what we're talking about here, because somatic practices and somatic therapy do exactly that. And what did you find once you released that layer of emotion, of stuck feeling? It got released through this practice that you had no control over, that just happened. Maybe because you felt safe enough as well in that situation. There were no stakes. And so you then had a new awareness, and it was a very certain, so you're not quite sure thing made way for, I know now, that is not what I want. So it revealed something to you that was already there, but that you hadn't been able to see prior because your body was still in protection mode. And so that's really a really great example of how it works.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing your insight on that because,
Well, thanks for sharing your story.
yeah,
Great
no,
story.
that's okay. And,
Yeah.
maybe that's a really good segue into this discussion today about, how do we reclaim our power? I really love
Mm.
this question and that self-determination because I think for me in that
Yeah.
moment, it felt like I did reclaim some
You
of my
did.
personal power. I
Absolutely,
was
you
like,
did.
I am not letting this world, whatever happened,
Yeah.
I'm not letting it have any power over me
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
Mm-hmm. You
And
did, but it wasn't through. It wasn't through. I'm doing this now. It wasn't through willpower. It was through the body.
yeah. So if we go out to, I guess, what you see, what is happening now where you see women that are really struggling, like they haven't reclaimed their power, they don't have that self-determination. How would you describe what you see as a common experience in this journey of motherhood? Let's start there and
So
I'll ask more
yeah, let's
questions.
start there. Gosh, it's a big question. Obviously, again, huge variety depending on individuals, but
Mm,
there are some general themes.
hmm.
Okay, so one big theme is we are beholden, or we feel we are beholden to a massive amount of expectation. Now, a lot of that expectation is actually coming from within ourselves, but it's perceived as the expectations of others, or it's subconsciously encoded and conditioned from a very, very young age of, the good mother, what it means to be a good mother, what it means to be a good woman, what it means to be successful. Okay, so what I find often is that our ideas of success paradoxically keep us stuck and disempower us. So that's a big one. So people can get really stuck. Women can get really stuck in ideas of I'm failing, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, frustration, resentment, I'm not keeping their boundaries because they don't feel they can and they don't know how. So this idea of being a good mother means that you're always available to your children. You never say no. Or this idea of being successful means you are hustling, the hustle culture. And so you burn out, where you deplete yourself trying to do everything, trying to be successful and a great mother all the time. And I've done this. I mean, I do this. I have to stop myself from doing this. It's so in us, to do that, to speak up, to voice our needs and voice our concerns to partners, to family, to kids, to our kids. That's a no. Mummy needs time now. Or I'm feeling upset. I'm just going to take a few minutes. Or there's so many ways that plays out. But if we're not taking care of ourselves, and I do think, I don't like to use the word self-care because it is so overused and so kind of, it's problematic in a lot of ways, because actually we need to get good at accepting care and asking for help, which is not always about self-care. It's actually about becoming reconnected and interconnected with our interdependence, communities and friends and families, and dropping this idea that we have to cope with everything, or that vulnerability is weakness, or that asking for help is failing, or that all of these things. And we know this in our heads. Okay, we know this. This is not new stuff I'm talking about. But to do it, like an example would be a friend comes around and you don't tidy the house. Okay, does anyone do that? Like, I rarely do, to be honest. I still feel like I know a really good friend because she walks in and I do not tidy. That is for me one of the or I can sweep the back porch while she's there. You know what I mean? Like that. That is real friendship. Or wait, come up, just tidy my room. Like, come sit on my bed while we talk. Do you want a tea? Come up with me. That sort of thing. That's real connection. And for some people that might be normal, but that was not my normal. Kind of is a bit now, but I've had to really work on it, like, which is absurd. But we have so many built up things around all of this. So I know this sounds like a bit of a weird sort of direction to go, but a lot of this stuff, like feeling less than unless we do certain things, or feeling less than unless we appear certain ways, that is disempowerment in action.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about the expectations, and I was just thinking in my head that there is so much self-inflicted expectation, really,
It's
isn't there?
intense.
When you think about it,
Yeah.
because we've probably adopted our own parents' expectations and, what they
Generations. Yeah.
expected. And,
Yeah.
maybe they've shifted a little bit, but I'm like, but there's still some that must be just so embedded that we are just
Sure.
operating
Yeah.
on it without even considering it.
Yeah, totally.
And then, I think, and I'd love to hear you talk about it, because, obviously our society and how we interact and engage and what we see and what's in our zone of consciousness now
Yes.
versus even 10 years ago versus 20 years
yeah.
ago. Like, it's just, we're
Totally.
now engaging with people across the globe. I mean, everybody's, saying what they think and no one's holding back. And there's a lot of judgment and criticism. Like, you only have to turn on your phone, jump into some social media, and, you'll find people with opinions on everything. And what some of the things I've noticed, some people saying is like, oh, I didn't realize that those people saw these words in that way. And now I've got to moderate myself in order to, please them. And I've got to
Yes,
change
they
it.
make
And
the mistake thinking it's about them.
yeah. And I was like, whoa, where are you going to draw the line? Like, anything that you say, do, be, could potentially upset somebody, because of whatever, that person's context is different from yours. But where are you ever going to draw the line if you're going to try to not be, or to be liked, to be acceptable by everyone? I was like, that's almost like an expectation that's unattainable. And you could,
Well, funnily enough, it's a trauma response. So wanting to be friends with everybody and fawning, as well, particularly friend or fawn. So needing to be friends, that people pleaser is a trauma response. It's a textbook. And a lot of people are not aware of that. So needing the world to like you is about you, but other people liking you or not liking you is about them. And so, and that thing of the freedom that comes when you really accept that in your soul. I don't mean just think about it and, believe it here. I mean, believe it here in your heart, There's something very, very powerful and freeing that happens. And it takes a lot of work. Like, that's the personal branding stuff. That's the somatic side of personal branding, is if you're not standing for something, you're standing for nothing. And if you're not pissing anybody off, you're not standing for anything. So, and I really believe that in marketing, you really want to repel the wrong people and attract the right ones. And if you're not repelling the wrong ones, you're not doing it right.
yeah, it's so true.
Magnetic, use the word magnetic.
Yeah.
Magnet, repel.
Yes. And to be able to strongly attract, you also have to be strongly repelling. Like, the same amount of force is happening in both ways. So you can't have this fear of repelling, right? And like, I don't want to repel anyone, but I do want to attract.
But that's not easy. So as you become visible, and this happened for me, I'll give a story because, we could talk about the theory all day, but I'll give a story.
Do a story. I love
relevant.
it.
So we moved to Bath, and I had been trying for 4 years to have our third child. I was nearly 45. I had tried everything. And then a month after getting there, I fell pregnant. And so I had a 11, 12-year-old, a 3-year-old, and I was heavily pregnant. And my husband was out of town most days. And it was really, I had no family, no friends, in a new country. It was challenging, right? I mean, exciting and amazing. And I now have that little boy, and he, completed our family. It was an incredible experience. And having a baby in Bath was amazing. There was a lot of great things to it, but I was really isolated. So I started a Facebook group, like anyone would, right? And and it became like I would, and it became Mums in Bath. And Mums in Bath grew and grew and grew to thousands and thousands of women. It was really needed. And as I was living in it, Bath is actually it's an amazing place in England. It's a very big tourist destination. Have you been there?
Yeah, I have. Yes, many times.
Beautiful place. So we lived right in the centre of town, right next to the Theatre Royal in a 4-story Georgian. Our house was in Bridgerton. So it was an amazing, amazing experience. And at the same time, I felt quite vulnerable, and I started this group, and then I was visible. And what I wasn't ready for was this one woman in particular. And she had a similar handle on Instagram. And she took umbrage to the fact that I had started this Facebook group and attacked me, and held a grudge for a long time. And it was so bizarre. And I grappled because, like, I was vulnerable. I had no friends, I had no family, I was pregnant with kids, and I would see her in the town. It's a really small town. I would see her and I would feel so activated every time I saw her. And I wanted to be her friend. Didn't know at that time that that was my trauma. That was my bullied as a child trauma. So she was like my bully in primary school. And my bully in primary school was in my friendship group, like a potential ally who actually was really mean. And so this was my bully being played out. And we do this with trauma. We play it out. It's the way that we actually bring it to the surface to be healed. I didn't know any of that then. Fortunately, I did know some great people who really helped me with this. And in the end, I did heal it. But at first, I was at once terrified and also just fawning over this woman. I'd go up to her and go, hi, how are you? Like, it'd be really friendly. And she'd be like, I want to talk to you, like really did not want to talk to me.
Oh, no.
It was bizarre. It was so awkward.
What do you think she had a problem about? Like, I just find that really curious.
She's
like,
just
what
competitive.
got to do with
She's
her?
just competitive.
Oh.
She just was totally competitive and not collaborative. And like, I actually attempted to collaborate with her initially. I had coffee with her. I talked about things we could do together. I was like, we could help each other because I'm such a collaborator. I'm such a women supporting, and she was not that. And not everybody is, right? And that's okay. But it was the becoming visible part freaked me out. I was like, oh my gosh, people know who I am. People know my name. If my kid misbehaves in the supermarket, they know who I am. They're judging me, like it was this full on visibility thing, which I won't go into in depth, but there's a lot of reasons we have this, okay, especially in Australia, funnily enough, the tall poppy thing. But so don't stand out, but it's very female as well. Don't take up space, don't speak up, don't stand out, all this stuff, okay?
And don't dare be successful.
Don't you dare.
Don't you dare. And never talk about it because, my goodness.
Right? The quote, the Marianne Williamson quote, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? This is one of my favorite quotes. So this is what it is. It's this thing that we are scared of that. So we have to address those fears first before we can step into our brilliance, before we can step into our power fully. We have to address, what is this fear? Where is it coming from? How do we clear it?
Yeah. So is that fear the same? Like, if we are resonating with that, is it the same for all of us, or does it come from different places? How do we find it in order to be able to clear it?
So interestingly, you don't need to find it to clear it. I know that sounds strange. Well, you do need to make contact with it and experience it like I did, or there's no need. So sometimes our body does throw up various, or our soul or our unconscious, whatever you want to call it, okay? But other levels of our beingness can throw up challenges. And the best description I've ever heard about that is that we have these bombs, these like stuck emotions like you experienced inside us. And unless the bomb is triggered, we don't know it's there, and we don't know it needs to be cleared, to be set off and released. So the triggers are our friends. It sure as heck doesn't feel like that when you're in it, but our triggers are an arrow pointing to where our next work is and where our growing edge is. Where is the edge of our bigness, and where's our next point of growth?
Mm-hmm. So just to clarify, I've understood you correctly, then we're kind of on the lookout for moments where we're feeling triggered by something, where we've got an emotional activated.
Yeah. I don't like the word trigger, but that's useful because people know it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like, if we can kind of take away the meaning and like not get attached to it and just go, well, when do I feel, I get a spark of annoyance or frustration? I'm like, well, I can see straight away when I've asked them to do something 5 times and they're not doing it, I get very frustrated. I'm like, or if it's, there's certain things that you would do where I mean, we all would know some straight away where you're like, well, I get frustrated when I hear people talking about XYZ. So, okay, interesting. Why do we get frustrated about that? What is it? Because
Yeah.
the frustration
Or
is ours,
when.
right? It's like it's nothing to do with them. This
Yeah.
is all on us.
And even if you don't know why, it's what does that feel like for you? It's can you notice when that's happening? How does it feel in your body? Where do you feel it in your body? Are you ready to clear that? Have you decided? Have you become willing to clear it? Because you may not be. You may be like, nah, screw that. I don't want to even look at that. And there is something about timing. So there's a divine right timing aspect, you know. It's one of the spiritual laws. It's like things will be cleared when the time is right. You can't force it. You can definitely facilitate it when the time is right, though.
Yeah. So you must I mean, I think I see people being triggered all the time. Like I'm in the social media feed and someone's having a little whinge about, I'm calling out this and that. And I'm like, you are just triggered by it. Like that's not to do with what the other people are doing. You're just having a moment of like, whatever it is bringing up something in you. And instead of blasting about it on social media, maybe you should ask yourself, why does this annoy me so much? I don't know.
Or
Like
not.
I always
Like
think
that's,
that.
or not. Like they might not want to. And that's okay as well. So that irreverence. But I used to have these moments like, when you're on a phone call with a call center and the person on the other end of the phone line or a receptionist or something is rude to you and you're the customer, right? So you got two choices in a way. You can react, you can be rude back. But I used to really enjoy, I used to do a lot of things on the phone with the job that I had. And I used to really enjoy just going, oh, wow, you sound a bit upset. Are you okay? Like just really softening. And it's surprisingly quick and confronting actually to a person when you are unconditionally accepting rather than making it about you. You just create a safe space for them. And it's super confronting actually because there's not a lot of those in our world. And that can work online as well. Like if you feel like you want to address it, you actually don't have to. You don't have to. You can delete it, you can block it, you can do all those things. But I prefer, having moderated groups with thousands of people in them before, I prefer to pick the battles that I really believe in. So if it's somebody making a racist comment, I 100% will have a conversation with that person. Possibly not online though, like publicly. I may contact them privately and say, hey, I'm not sure if you realize this, but something that you said actually is a little on the kind of discriminatory side and has upset a few people. Do you want to change it? Like give them an opportunity to step into a higher frequency with it and actually be better. Give them an opportunity because you'd be surprised how many people are just having a really crappy day and are completely unaware of how they are coming across or playing out. Or some are actually choosing to be conflicting. They want conflict, which is that's another conversation. But yeah, it's quite interesting what happens, and I've done this many times. And the first thing they will do is go into defense. I'm not racist. My XYZ, they'll say, like when the COVID was happening, there was a comment about it was racist against Chinese people, as there was quite a lot at that time. And I went into a side chat and had a conversation with a local woman, who had kids at my school, like kids' school, and and I just said, I don't know if you realise, but there's a couple of people have contacted me about your comments. They're a bit upset, and she went straight into, what do you mean? I grew up with Chinese family next door to me. I've got plenty of friends who are Chinese, which is often what someone will say when they're an unaware racist. But I know a Chinese person. I'm not racist against Chinese, which is absurd, of course. And then I just remember sort of talking her through, and it was actually really cool. Like she did not like that conversation, but I know because I've seen her since and we're friendly. I know that I managed it in a respectful way and that she came to think differently and question a little bit, and I thought, well, that's great. Like if you just have a conversation, if you can, if that's something you're passionate about, great. If it's not something you're passionate about, let them.
Yeah.
Let them.
Well, that's interesting because I guess we were talking about, the weight of expectation and what everyone is, all of the pressures, and you've got to act a certain way or say a certain thing. And then also, your own, whether you're reacting to something and it's got a deeper meaning. How, in those sort of situations, I mean, you might see somebody saying something that to you seems a bit like, well, but is that just because you're not on the same wavelength as them, you're not on the same frequency, and is it something that we need to take on or not? And
It's a choice. It's a
it's
choice.
right.
And that's where the power comes in. Okay. So we have to remember that we decide our values, we choose where we put our energy or not. So it's a direct example of empowered choices. Like this is how we retain energy for the things that are important for us, and we give out energy for the things that are important for us. We choose, we decide. And so we got to know our values to do that. We have to know who we are to do that.
Mm. So what is an example of somebody who's living in a place where they are unempowered right now? How are they acting, reacting, responding?
Well, they're reacting usually. Maybe they don't know that. So let's take, for example, my experience of that immediately. I think about being in a relationship with a power imbalance, and I've had many of those in my life. Not anymore, but I used to a lot, and I still have to look out for it. And that's something that can come from childhood. It can come during family violence. It can come, in a lot of different ways. It can just come in friendships as well, I think. And so if you are in that situation, it's pretty likely that you are not completely aware of it. And it's pretty likely that it's wearing you down. So when you're in that sort of state of survival, okay, when you're in survival mode, and there's lots of other reasons that could happen, but let's just take that. You're in a relationship that is disempowering or not good for you. And this can happen at work as well. So if you continue to participate in that relationship over time, you will inevitably become depleted. You'll be drawn off your center. So you will come away from your own values and away from your own sense of who you are. You'll have to in order to survive it. And that's, again, natural, no judgment, right? This is what happens. This is what we do. Sometimes we do whatever we have to do to survive a difficult situation. And I respect that. But over time, it will deplete you. You will likely start to question your self-worth. That's a natural byproduct. If you probably weren't already, which is maybe why you attracted it, why you're in it, is because you already didn't value yourself or feel worthy of something better. And this happens again for lots of reasons. This is a really big thing, you've asked me. But essentially, it takes a toll, okay, on your health, on your well-being, on your true wealth. So your freedom, your financial freedom, your personal freedom, your all those things eventually over time, and they accumulate, they snowball. It's really damaging, on every level. And it will likely start to seep into other areas of your life. And that's the people I often work with. Some people, it's just at the beginning of that, or they've done a lot of healing in the past and it's come back. So they're like, I need to address this again. It's not always as severe as this picture I'm painting. I'm kind of exaggerating a big version, right? But to varying degrees, it's generally coming back to lack of self-love, self-worth, not feeling like you're enough. It's almost always coming from those places.
And would you be aware of it, or would you be potentially thinking
on
it's someone else?
Level,
like, do you hear
on
people?
some level, you usually start with victim, though. Yeah, absolutely. That's where you start. You start with blame. Anyone who's not okay can't address, is unable generally to address the root cause, right? So victim and blame is like the first step. That's a natural first step. This thing has happened to me is absolutely valid. That is how you experience a crisis. That is how you experience. And I wouldn't be saying to someone in the beginning stage of a crisis or some sort of life transition, you've got to find your power. Like, that's not That's not appropriate. Like, that is definitely what you need to do, but that's not where you start. You start with, am I healthy? Mental, emotional, and physical fitness is where
Yeah.
you start.
Mm. And specifically with motherhood, are there any sort of or commonly experienced stages or phases where you see somebody who really has somehow gotten to that place where they've lost their power and they are feeling really sort of stuck and
Yeah, I think so. I think certainly in early stages of motherhood, it's very challenging. We sort of this back to normal idea after you have babies. I just want my life back. I just want to get back to normal. I want to come back to myself. I talk about coming home to yourself, but I don't feel like that's coming back to yourself. Like you forever changed. And this is anyone who's carried a baby, let alone birthed. You're forever changed. So this is a bit of a stumbling block, especially if you have a child a bit older and you've had a lot of freedom and you've lived your own life and you've, done whatever you wanted and you've had total freedom. And then all of a sudden this little creature takes over your life. And maybe this little creature is nothing like you thought they would be, or has something else going on, or there's another challenge, you have a separation, or, things don't go to plan. Right? That's the bit that often I think things are not what you expect. I mean, personally, I thought that becoming a mother would fix all my problems magically.
Oh, wow.
I just had this, and I had some problems, right? So I guess it was wishful thinking, but I really believed that, and then I was shocked when I was the same person in a lot of ways, but just with more challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy because when you do think about it, I remember I was a little bit older as well. I was 35 when I had my first child, and I'd done a lot of traveling. I had an amazing time in my 20s and early 30s. Lived all over the world, and did, really was living life to the fullest. And I think we all, like, I was fit and healthy, and so for me going into that pregnancy, I was like, right, well, I'm staying doing my exercise and I was still working, and I was very lucky that I didn't really experience any ill health at all during my pregnancy, so I could carry on life as normal. And then I was like, just at the end I was like, okay, well, this is now a bit different, I have to wear different clothes and all that. But I kind of had that expectation of like, yeah, well, why is it going to change me? Like, I'm going to do some different things. But you're so right in that, and I don't think it's probably one of those things that unless you've been through it, you don't really recognize that it's not the same you that you're going to go back to. It's actually a new version of you that maybe has some things that you like from who you were before, but you're never going to be the same person or exactly the same as you were before, because how could you? Like, you've gone through a whole transition.
And we're not very well educated about it either. Like, matrescence is the single biggest change for a woman in their lifetime. It's bigger than adolescence. Our brain changes, our body changes, our role in society and culture changes, our everyday life changes. Everything changes. It's a multi-system shift. And we're not really prepared for it very well in our society. I don't think there's a lot of myths and there's a lot of, TV and films, it's not real. And then the reality of it can be really challenging. And we've also lost, I think, a lot of, supports. When I talk about having a baby in Bath, it was amazing because it was a smaller city and there was an incredible network of volunteers running groups every day or every other day to support women. And it was a phenomenal experience of early motherhood. There was also a nanny school in Bath, which meant you could get placements of the Norland nannies, the ladies that for the royal nannies. And actually, I had a young man who I'm still in contact with today who was amazing. And I had him for 6 weeks, 4 days a week for free. So like things like that. It was a phenomenal experience of early motherhood. But also I think there's another flashpoint often. Well, there's many, but I think, having a second or a third, like having multiple children, can be a really big change. But also relationship changes, moving, and also when your kids go to school actually, and I'm sure you experience this working with women who start businesses. Often we feel a lot of pressure when our kids start school. It's like, oh, well, who am I now?
Yeah.
You know?
Mm. Yes, because the role changes again, doesn't it? And suddenly
Yeah.
you
And
probably
teenage,
got
moving
expectations
out.
of what that looks like
Yeah.
based on what you previously conceived your future to look like. But then you get there, and yeah, I think navigating it can be, definitely difficult. And when we're thinking about the fact that I guess you do give so much of yourself in those early years, and you're doing the things to be a good mother to your children and to care for them, and their life and their survival is of the utmost importance, right? So you do put yourself on the back burner. Yeah, and I think that comes to that point there where you start to emerge from that and you start to be able to have some time and space. Um, and that's, I'm guessing, where you see there's this sort of challenge of like, well, how do I come back to that, that forceful knowing and that confidence that, I certainly can look back on the time before I had children and see, I knew exactly who I was and what I was doing and everything, I really was in my power then. Now I'd say, yes, I have that now again, but it looks different.
It's different. And we
Yeah.
grieve. We have to grieve the
Mm-hmm.
versions of ourselves that have passed. We often don't talk about that grief that we feel we don't get to meet that version of you again. And I noticed that particularly I have a 21-year-old, and we were single. I was a single parent with him for 7 years. And so we're very close. And he recently went away for a season overseas. And I was floored when he left, and I wasn't expecting that. And I think part of it was that I was getting this double whammy of see you later, goodbye, a new stage of parenting him, as well as grieving the version of me that brought him up and did all this amazing work on my own in those first 7 years to then meet my now partner, have 2 more kids, did, this huge kind of transformation that was really hard. And I worked and I studied and I changed and it was massive. And I realized that part of him leaving home was me also farewelling this part of myself, and it was grief. It was grief. I was bereft. And I think we often don't recognize that even the stages of our children's development, we grieve. Your child turns 5, goes to school, you grieve that you don't have a toddler anymore. Your child's a toddler, you grieve that you don't have a baby anymore. Grief is a huge aspect of motherhood that we kind of we just kind of gloss over it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really legitimate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's so interesting. I've never thought about it like that before, but I can kind of see that we can also get really attached to those past versions of ourselves and like be wanting them and wanting to get back to it. And
that's natural.
And how frustrating it feels when you are still attached, and maybe it's sort of like being able to accept where you are now and be grateful
100%.
for who you were, and that instead of trying to be that you're like, that's part of me still, but that's in my past.
Yeah. But first we have to feel the grief. So you got to honor the feeling. So if you move straight to, I've got to feel gratitude, I've got to feel good, I've got to feel happy about what I have, we miss the opportunity to feel that very legitimate and natural sense of grief. And without allowing ourselves the spaces, because we don't have rites of passage, we don't have those celebrations of milestones always anymore in our culture. Some of us might culturally, but many of us don't. So we've lost the spaces and places to have those feelings and celebrate as well as feel the grief, right? So, and do it in support of, with support of the community. We just don't have that. So I do think this is a really big area of kind of a missed opportunity. And it's where some of our stuff gets stuck. Because we don't realize, we're not even aware. But you're absolutely right. Awareness, acceptance, these are the keys,
Mm-hmm. So we've touched on quite a few parts of, I guess, what we're experiencing and places where we may have given our power away or not be embodying that. Would you say, like, is there a process that you go through in terms of phases of that we can sort of go, right, the first step is, maybe grieving for your past self and those things, and
Yeah.
is there a linear process here? Sometimes I get
Kind
very
of.
mathematically minded about these things, and I love all of the
I love it. Yeah.
woo,
I
but I'm
do
like,
have a framework.
yeah,
Yeah.
does it
Yeah. I
does it
do.
work like that?
It kind of does. There's a couple of different ways I use. I've got a couple of different ways of thinking about it, because sometimes it's linear, sometimes it's not, as you've rightly pointed out. But I do run a program, and that program, you can do it in a linear fashion, or you can go straight to the thing you need, right? I think it's really common for us to have those sort of I'm never enough. I doubt myself through motherhood. I think it's really natural to feel isolated and disconnected in the modern way that we do womanhood and motherhood. And I do think that a lot of women are finding their needs are not being met, that they're depleted and burnt out on a cyclical. It may never be so bad that you go to see a psychologist, or that you feel like you have a mental health problem. Some do obviously feel that, but and treatment's important, right? But if you're in that grey area, and this grey area mental illness stuff, or grey area mental health, whichever side of the coin you're on, it's not bad enough that you need a diagnosis, but it's not good enough that you're okay with it. That's where a lot of women live, and that's for me a great shame. So I really do the best I can to focus on that. This space, which is the cycles of burnout, the cycles of depletion that just don't quite ever, you don't ever feel 100% whole or like yourself. That's typically the kind of thing that I get drawn to, and the process then is unique for each person, but there are certain touch points that definitely help. And the linear process is basically, you start with awareness, and you start with health and fitness, mental, spiritual. You reconnect, and then you connect, and then you connect with others. So you connect with yourself, and you connect with others. And you connect your values to your life. You start to work, what are my values? How do I connect those to my life? And then you do an audit. Am I living according to my values? Like, part of my program is actually to do with your home, and kind of an eco home process, because I think a lot of women want to be nurturers of the planet and look after the earth, but can't, or don't feel they can, because it's inaccessible, it's too much, it's too expensive. So I offer really simple ways to do that, because I think we actually naturally are connected to, like, Mother Earth, Mother. I think there's a connection that we kind of yearn for. So that's there, if you want to do it. And then there's about, how do we create what we want to create in our life, like a sort of legacy creation process, like what do I consciously want to create for the future of my family and myself? And then, how do I stay on purpose? How do I actually create that vision and then stay in alignment with that vision? And in every single time, like, every religion in the world, every philosophy in the world points to, our purpose is the same. It's service. It's, what do we want to contribute? It's impact, right? So it's not really about what is my purpose. Our purpose is service. It's how do we fulfill that purpose? What is our vision for our lives in fulfilling that purpose? So that's the linear.
Yes. Yeah, amazing. I love that. And I just love the word contribute, because I think sometimes when we talk about purpose, it can get so, yeah. And like, when you're trying really hard to put a thread on something, to ground it, to be like, what does this actually mean? And, so simply, when you said, it's like, what is your contribution? Like, that's it.
Absolutely.
That is your purpose.
Absolutely.
And it's like, what a great word. Maybe we can replace a lot of purpose with contribution. And like, I think purpose is when you're really stepping into your power and you're knowing it and finding it. Like, what is that contribution that you want to be making, or that you want to
purpose
leave
is
behind?
that's right. I agree. And purpose is alignment of body, heart, mind. Like, purpose is embodying heart and mind.
Yes. Yeah.
That's when you're on purpose, right? So, and I also think that in service is a really useful, like, what are you in service to? What are you in service of?
Yeah.
Like, what,
Yeah.
it's actually not about you.
No.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant. And so in going through these steps and, really finding, well, I guess refinding yourself, removing these things that are keeping you in that place where you're feeling that disempowerment, stepping into your power, would you say that the self-determination that you mentioned before is connected to or a byproduct of being in your power or reclaiming that power?
It's
How
kind
are
of
they
both
connected?
ways. It's like an arrow pointing both ways, because I was mentioning before willingness and decision making, that no change happens without our willingness and our decision making, right? That is self-determination. Like, that's what that is. That's I'm choosing. And when you're not choosing, that's okay. We go through that. Everybody goes through that. But you are beholden. But I must say there's a caveat here, and it isn't straightforward, which is that we do need to surrender and flow as well, right? So there's self-determination, but that's not the same as control over. It's control within. So I'm talking about self-mastery. I'm talking about learning how to run this rig, the body, mind, spirit, whatever, all this stuff that we are, and do that in a way that acknowledges our interdependence with nature, with each other. We are interdependent, we are interconnected, and this illusion that we are separate does not serve us. Okay, we are all in this together, whether we want to be or not. Even the trolls in the group that are leaving, we're connected to them. We're all connected. We're having a collective experience, and I know we don't like to do that with people that are not inside our bubble or are not in our echo chamber, but the truth is we're all connected. So, and it's the same within. All these parts of us are connected. So it's when we start to work under that understanding. It's like, okay, well, I've got to master my own stuff, my own crap, and and then I've got to also understand how to flow with what's going on out there. And it's a constant push-pull, and it's a constant surrender. So you surrender your power, but you also live in your power. It's both. You surrender your power with the things you can't control, and you live in your power with the things you can.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And, when you think about what you were saying, like the first act of self-determination is making a decision that you don't want to stay where you are anymore, and that you're going to change something. You're going to think about it differently. You're going to take some action. Like that's, it begins willingness. Immediately, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I'm willing.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's so amazing. Thank you so much. We've had an incredible conversation today. So
we have. It's been so fun. Thank you.
I feel like there's so many more things that we've left untapped, but we will have to save some for another day. Now, Alena, if anybody's looking to connect with you and to find out more, even follow you along on social media, where do you hang out? Where's the best place for them to find you?
The best way to find me is just look up my name. It's AlenaTurley. So alenaturley.com or Alena Turley on Instagram. And there's a multitude of wonderful resources that I offer. I offer a free first session, which is 20 minutes long on the phone. I also offer some resources when you join a free community. And I'm just about done wrapping up a really beautiful secret podcast series that will quite possibly be out by the time you air this, called The Connection Keys. And that's really exciting. It's 7-day audio secret podcasts. So lots of wonderful things, all based around this theme of how do we really reconnect and come back to who we are, come home to ourselves.
Brilliant. Thank you. We'll make sure they're all linked up in the show notes, including your secret podcast. So do make sure that you send me that link through once you have it published, because this podcast will be coming out once. Yeah, definitely yours will be live before we have this one aired. But
I hope so. I'm nearly done.
Yeah, no, that's so great. Appreciate your time and sharing your wisdom and your insights. I hope that there's been so many different aspects to think about, maybe some new perspectives to try on, and different ways that we can look at ourselves and what can we shift the things that are feeling stuck or not right, and that we've got that resistance around. And I think that you've beautifully shared that, yes, it is entirely possible. It's just...
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on She's the Business. Thanks, Jen. And I just really am grateful to have this conversation with you today. It's been really cool.
Yes, awesome. My pleasure. And thank you. We'll have you back another time.
I would love that. Bye, everyone.